My name is Jeremy Quainoo. I am a member of Joe Latte. I actually was a member of both Joe Latte Toastmasters Club and Fidelity Toastmasters Club, and I joined the Toastmasters community in April 2018. I don't think I needed a lot of convincing. I had always known that I had a deficiency when it came to public speaking, not in terms of the knowledge of what I wanted to say, but in the confidence to stand up in front of an audience. It became very clear to me one particular day at work when I began to recognize that in the corporate world, a lot of the people who got bigger and better opportunities, like promotions, larger responsibilities, were not always the smartest or the hardworking, but most often the people who spoke up and spoke out the loudest. And I realized that if I did have the knowledge, but my deficiency was the confidence to speak up, then I had to work on it. So right that night, I went online, looked for the nearest Toastmasters club. I called the number, it happened to be DTM Michael Adute, and I asked where I could come. So I initially intended to go to the Accra Toastmasters, but that day it was Joe Latte that was meeting, and that's how come I ended up joining. And right from day one, I realized that this is what I was looking for, and then I stayed. I think one, I have seen the name Toastmasters come up in movies or in articles. And when you do Google public speaking practice, Toastmasters becomes one of the recommendations. If you Google public speaking practice Ghana, Toastmasters is also on the first page. So it was quite easy to find if you went online. It's funny, the number of moments that made me feel like this is a turning point for me. But I think one of the things that I had avoided for a long time and I didn't recognize that subconsciously I was avoiding was table topics. Because I wasn't good at speaking off the cuff. And I didn't know how to practice speaking off the cuff. I didn't understand the concept of not practicing before you speak. I had completed one full path. I had even done speech contests, which were there was a lot of pressure there. I didn't think that it would compare to the first time I decided, okay, I would do table topics. And I realized that the fact that I can now do table topics means that I'm right, because I realized that I had gone almost a year avoiding table topics. I would only participate when I was randomly chosen. I would never volunteer, and I would never review myself after I had done that because subconsciously I didn't understand speaking off the cuff. So I think once I realized that I am confident enough to go on stage, not know what I'm going to be asked, be given a question, and within 2 minutes actually deliver a speech that is coherent, that's when I realized that, okay, I see improvement now, and this thing that I struggled with is becoming a strong point. That's a brilliant question. I think one of the biggest realizations for me in Toastmasters was, as a concept I learned from project management, but it was so vividly at play in Toastmasters, and it's the concept of servant leadership. Toastmasters is an environment where you're required to lead others by serving them. Nobody's paying you for taking on roles, nobody's paying you for being club president, VPE, but you're required to get people to do the things that they're required to do and make sure that the meeting is organized in as efficient a manner as possible. Now, if you can't reward people or penalize them, then the only option you have is to find a way to influence and motivate them. And the only way you can do this is through service. So Toastmasters forces you to find innovative ways of getting people to move towards a goal that you collectively have, which is very different from leadership in more corporate institutions. So I think one of the realizations for me in Toastmasters was how much servant leadership comes to play and how much you can lead by serving others, right? If you won't follow yourself, nobody else will follow you. So you first have to show what you want others to do, and then they see it, and then they follow your lead. But you have to also be creative because the people you're working with are different and you have to sometimes tailor your approach to the different people. So I think servant leadership is one of the biggest turning or revelations for me when it came to the leadership aspect of Toastmasters. And I think it's served me quite well in other areas. Other than divisional director, I've been every other one. I've been an area director, I've been club president, I've been the VPE. If you're talking about the individual club roles, then I've performed every single club role multiple times. I have substituted for different club roles. I've substituted for sergeant at arms, secretary, treasurer. I've played every single role that there is. And it was because I think when I joined Toastmasters, it's one thing that I tend to do. I sort of introspect and gauge myself, and I realized that I'm not at the level that of the people that I'm seeing that I admire. And I don't have as much time, or at least I always give myself a timeline to sort of get to that level. So rather than doing things slowly, I try to do as much as possible because if I commit 1,000%, but then eventually I'll lose interest. So I want to make sure that I make the most out of that period where I'm committing 1,000%, which is why I was double hatting both president and VPE. And even when I was area director, I was still basically performing club roles for some of the clubs in my area. So yeah, I've basically gone through all the roles that are possible to get other than division director. I think my most memorable speeches were the first day that I visited the club. I think I was going there to determine if this was what I was looking for or not. And that day, I remember the three people who spoke were Tony Safo, Dan Soa, and Michael Adote. And the reason why it was so memorable was because later on I began to realize that those are like an all-star cast. But that day, it was a combination of Dan Soa gave a very inspiring talk about her work. I think the title was Tea Bags, Work and Tea Bags or something like that. And her story was humorous, but it had a very core message to it. And the way she wove the two together, I found it very impressive. Then came Michael Adote with a very motivational talk, talking about self-acceptance, striving for excellence, but balancing that with accepting who you are and your flaws as normal and not diminishing, normal. The way he also went about it, Michael has this unique way of appealing to you, smiling and speaking. And I think the one that hit the nail home for me was Tony Safo. He actually did a speech that was a story. It was folklore, and it was, I don't know if the word is it satire. It had a let's call it a bad ending. But the way he told the story, I couldn't tell if he was reciting from memory or he was speaking off the cuff. And the story was one of those that takes you on this emotional roller coaster. Some parts you get extremely happy and it's funny. And then it's so gruesome and down, and then you're back. So it's sort of like he played with the emotions. And I was just in awe of people being able to do this. The first time I'd been exposed. So right afterwards, I was like, playing these speeches back, I'm like, I need to be able to do this as well. Even if it's not at their level, I need to be able to get to the point where I can stand confidently, speak without notes, without any pointers, without presentations, and convey a message in such an articulate manner as these guys have done. And until today, I always remember those three speeches as what actually gave me the motivation to continue going. There's two favorites that I have. There's actually three. There's so many speeches you give. The first speech I would say is one that I titled Success is Personal. And I think that speech was special for me because I wrote it in a day. I had procrastinated till the day of the speech and I didn't have a topic. And I think that the reason I had procrastinated was because I was going through my own emotions where, you feel at certain points that you're not progressing in life as the way that you expected. And I think I had read a book where they talked about how the benchmark that you're using could be wrong. And so I thought about it and I was like, yeah, just because I don't have this car doesn't mean that I'm not doing well. Just because I'm not earning this money doesn't mean I'm not doing well. both my parents are alive, I have family, I have friends, I have people who genuinely care about me, and I'm doing these things that I want to do. So then the title of the speech then became Success is Personal. And it was tied into the fact that what Peter may consider success is different from what Jeremy considers success. And as long as Peter is meeting his goals, even if they differ from mine, Peter should be content in the fact that what he's doing is success to him. And his success doesn't have to be my success because success is personal. So that was one of the speeches that I really liked because of how it came about. The second one was obviously the speech contest where I beat you. That was, we were supposed to do renditions of popular speeches, and I did one by Danajia Hetirachi, I See Something in You. And it was one of my favorite because of how much I had to practice that speech to get it right enough, because I knew how hard you would go for yours. And after the speech, I was actually just happy that I was able to pull it off. So I would have been okay with the results because I didn't actually think I could know the speech that well. To the point where even now I'm able to recite it because of how I practiced that speech over 200 times. I kid you not. My wife could recite the speech because of how many times she had heard me do it. And I knew that nobody would go that because there was no reward for it. It was just a Toastmaster speech. So I remember that because it showed me that I am willing to go more of an extra mile than other people think. And that was one of the best. And I think the last one was a speech that was inspired by my mentor, where she talks about your heart set, your skill set, and your mindset. And I did that speech because I didn't want to forget her words because they have carried me through my career. At any point in time, where your heart is, your integrity, your values have to maintain. Your mindset, whether you have a growth mindset, is really important. And then your skill set, what do you bring to the table? What can you do? If they took away your father's name, your money, everything else, as an individual, what can you do? What is your value that you bring to the table that was not created by or handed to you? It's something that she's instilled in me, and I did a speech. I made a YouTube video about it because I wanted to entrench it, because I realized that in every situation I faced in my career, just having the right heart set, skill set, and mindset has propelled me on. So those were the most memorable ones. I would say rewarding, intense, and growth. I think intense because of the way I approached it. I don't think Toastmasters is learning at your own pace. I just recognized that there was an opportunity here to accelerate my growth. And the reason why I joined 2 clubs was because I recognized that having a meeting every other week was not enough practice for somebody at my level, or at least at the level that I thought I was. And for where I wanted to get to in terms of my ability to communicate, I felt like I needed more practice to even get to the level of the people that I was seeing, because I was in such awe of them. Now, on top of being a member of 2 clubs, I was also playing the role of officer in 2 clubs. So I was president and vice president. You know that with those roles, you tend to have to substitute yourself into the club meetings because people will disappoint. So you're not only managing 2 clubs, you're managing 2 sets of club officers, and you're managing 2 recurring meetings that's happening every single week. And I also had a goal to complete my path. So that means I was delivering a speech every single week. So for me, it was quite an intense period. And I'm so glad that the growth also came in such an intense manner. Because like you said, the moment when I realized that I'm no longer not confident, I'm no longer getting the nerves as much as I used to. And when I say I used to have the nerves, it used to be so bad that after every speech, I'd have to sit in my car for about 30 minutes because my head would be pounding. That was how intense it was for me. When I recognized that, I gave a speech today, I'm fine. That was a revealing moment for me. So I think that's why I would consider it an intense period for me. I think I've just generally become a more organized person. Because of the nature of the way a club is run, or a club meeting is run, because of the way you have to delegate whether you want to or not, because there's certain times you have to also take on a lot more than you would think you're capable of. And because the meeting is timed and everything is allotted within the time box, I noticed that even outside of the Toastmasters club, I started carrying them over. But if you look behind you, you'll see that I already have my plan. And it's something that I constantly do, right? It's putting things in perspective, giving it a time box, organizing it in the way that I think is most efficient. And I learned all of that from Toastmasters. Things like retrospection, introspection came from being an evaluator and being evaluated and knowing that, okay, with every activity or action that you take, you do have to take time to reflect on how could I have done this better? What are the little iterative steps I could have taken to improve, even by 1%? And why did I make the mistakes that I made? And just understanding the little things that you could have done to improve or the little things that held you back from improving. I think those are all things that I learned from Toastmasters, and I think it's generally made me a more organized person. Oh, there are a lot. Papa Akers, Eno, Dr. Susie, Belinda, Dr. Susie really forced me to get into networking because I was the kind of person who would come into the Toastmasters meeting after the meeting. I'm gone. There was a day they locked the door and they actually made an announcement that there's a gentleman here who comes in and then immediately leaves. And today he's going to go around and introduce himself to everybody. So they held my hand, went around. I had to do, hi, I'm Jeremy. I joined the States. Happy to meet you. I had to do that for everybody. And I began to recognize that it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. Even you, Peter, we've been in competitions together, and I noticed that if I did not bring my A game, this dude would embarrass me. So I remember that in the entire competition, my whole mind is that Peter is going to go all out. If I don't go all out, if that's not a word, this dude is going to make me look bad on stage. Because I've seen you do it to other people. And I was like, he's laughing about it, but he is going to embarrass you on stage. He's a totally different person when it comes to competition. So there's lots of people who have held that. And even my mentees, I have people that I have been a mentor to who have, changed my perspective on a lot of things. Being understanding of people's feelings about things, even if it differs from how I would feel about it, acknowledging that this is where somebody is starting from. And regardless of how trivial it may sound to you, that's really how they feel, and this is how you handle them. It's made me a more accommodating person. So there's been lots of people in the community that have inspired my journey. Ajwa Odum, Carl, Renee. There's so many people I could mention. Especially the first people I spoke about, Tony Sappho, Danswa, Michael Adams. There's just lots of names. That's actually quite a difficult question. I think like all things, it first starts with you and being very clear about what you want out of life or out of the things that you put in effort into. I think one thing that I knew from the beginning was I want to improve as a speaker because I recognize all the value, the merits that come with that. And Toastmasters was my chosen avenue to make this happen. So I didn't choose Toastmasters as something that I was just trying. I actually chose it as something that I'm doing and I'm going all the way with. So the first thing would be having your own personal goal and being convicted or having that conviction that I'm going to see this through. The second thing is having a support system. I remember that at certain points, I've started to feel burnout. And I'm not the kind of person who actually feels burnout. I used to think people exaggerate when they talk about these things. And I used to think when people are talking about burnout, they're not talking about me because I don't know what they're talking about. When people used to talk about stress, I didn't really know those kind of things. But I felt it. I began to recognize that my internal intrinsic motivation was dwindling. I no longer felt as much joy from doing the speeches, joining the club meetings. And I had also hit certain milestones that I had already targeted and I thought were far-fetched much sooner than I thought I would. So then the question was like, so what next? What am I doing now? And it took people like Eno coming in to be my sort of personal speaking coach to point out areas that I still wasn't as good at, that I would not have been able to recognize myself. And Papa Akis forcing me to, not forcing me, but basically letting me know that I can do the area director role and letting me know that this is the next level for me and explaining why he thinks it's the next level for me. Those are blind spots I didn't know I had. So first the goals, then two, having that support system. And I think just the discipline. Discipline, so many people describe it so many ways, but discipline essentially is doing the things that you need to do even when you don't feel like doing them. When you make it a habit, at some point you begin to go on autopilot. So you wake up and your decision to undertake certain actions has nothing to do with how you feel that day. You will do it regardless of how you feel. Those two things become separate. You've made an agreement with yourself that I am doing these 50 speeches and I'm on speech 39. It doesn't matter how I'm feeling unless I'm demobilized because of sickness or something else. But if I woke up and I was unhappy, the unhappiness does not mean I'm not going to do my speech. I think those three things are sort of a unique formula that I think propelled me to run through the program the way I did. So goals, the support system, and just that intrinsic discipline. Two of the most valuable and transferable skills in any industry, any area of your life are communication and leadership. Communication and leadership are so core to almost everything that we do in our relationships with our families, with our spouses, in our jobs, in our careers. And the best place to hone those skills is Toastmasters. Once you are able to convey your thoughts in a manner that people find coherent, whether we like it or not, a lot of people still judge your intelligence by your ability to communicate or not. So you might as well learn how to do it effectively so people don't constantly underestimate you. Leadership is something that you have to do individually yourself. Sometimes you have to lead yourself, but you don't know how to. And Toastmasters teaches you a lot of that. So you're basically killing two birds with one stone by joining a community of like-minded people. And the great thing about it is you don't have to do it alone. When you fall, people will help you get back on track. And there's so many people to sort of inspire you, pick you up, and to learn from. So I would say that two of the most transferable skills are what the Toastmasters community offers, and you would be doing yourself a great disservice if you remained, sitting on the fence for too long, because in this period you could have been improving and becoming the better leader and communicator that you want to be.